Let's talk about hiring for illustrators.
Okay.
So, what's the process like?
Yeah. I think most importantly is understanding the role you're applying for. So, for example, if let's say the company is asking for a they're asking for like vector based. Let's say you've seen the company's website, you've seen their work, and all their work are like vector based. You should kind of get an idea of what they want. Obviously, your portfolio should be curated towards that, but not too much. Like just curate towards that so that they know that you can create what they want and also have some other pieces that can show like your flexibility and cool. But ideally, if let's say we're hiring and back then when I was still like an illustrator then for uLesson, like if we were hiring and we saw your portfolio, if we saw like a portfolio that resonated with us and like what we were already putting out, it was like it was a quicker yes. Hello everyone, I'm Joshua David Tarafa, most known as WoshDraws or Tarfism, and you are listening to the Designstration podcast with Ufot Ubon. Design plus illustration equals Designstration.
Hello, everyone. You're welcome back to the Designstration podcast. And my name is Ufot Ubon, and I am your host for this podcast. And on today's episode, I have with me an exceptional illustrator and more. And for this particular guest, I'm going to be doing a little different. My introduction is going to be very different because sometimes in 2019, I needed help coming into digital illustration. And there were quite a number of illustrators already, right? But this particular fellow, back to back, I was in his DM. Like, literally, I was there with a bowl of noodles and he was spoon feeding me. Literally, like he was spoon feeding me. What graphic tablet should I get? What software should I use? What is Krita? What, like literally back to back. This particular fellow, this particular boss of mine, he's exceptional, he's patient, he's kind, he's very helpful. It's no other person than the incredible Joshua David, popularly known as WoshDraws. Actually, he has rebranded and he's going to tell us why he rebranded, but popularly is known as WoshDraws. Boss, shout out to you. Shout out to you.
Thank you for that intro.
Thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for that intro. I feel like I'm going to struggle to meet up to that expectation because you've hyped me up to here, and I'm worried I'll be a disappointment now. But thank you so much. And also, I think you didn't give yourself enough credit because mine was just saying, "Oh, use Creator and all of that." You've done really well for yourself, and I mean, it's one thing to give advice, it's another thing to take it to another level. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
it's all credit to you. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. What's your journey been like so far? How did you come into illustration? How did you start?
Okay. So I would say I started like taking art and illustration seriously in secondary school. So back then, I used to have like a comic book, making comics in those sketchbooks. So I kind of mixed that with entrepreneurship. Like if you wanted to read my comic, you have to give me your nightcap. It was a boarding school.
Wow.
So if you want to read my
Boarding
comics,
school.
you give me your nightcap and yeah, and then you could read my comics. So I started with that, and I guess sometime towards SS2, SS3, I delved into graphic design. So I actually started with graphic design first. And then a friend of mine back then was like, "Oh, it'd be really cool if you could make these your drawings digital." And I was like, digital art? How does that even work? Because like obviously you'd see comics, but at that time I was still stuck with the idea that people would draw it by hand and then I didn't know how they would do it. Like I still had that idea of they would scan the images to make them digital. So it was then I now looked into how people did that. I first landed on Draw with Jazza. So
Mm-hmm.
I think my first digital art was actually done with like red color pencil and then with ink. And then I scanned it.
Mm.
Since I was already familiar with graphic design, I would scan it. There's in Photoshop, there's a way that you'd filter an image that
Yeah.
all the red and blues would fade out and it would just be black. So I would do that and then color the art using like the fill tool and stuff like that. And then, like most Nigerian illustrators, I landed on Duro and Dux.
Yeah. Yeah.
I landed on Duro and Dux. Yeah. So Dukes, I came about I found him around the same time. So Duro, I found him through Davido's cover art Skelewu. So that the caricature. So I had backtracked and found him, and then I was following his illustrations back then, the Born and Belly illustrations, and then you know how you'd follow up. The second was Dukes. Dukes, I found him through a cover art as well. So that was for Bonner Boy's Shock Norris. So that's how I found both of them. I was like, oh, people actually do this in this country. And then I think the person that finally gave me the push, actually two people. The first was Momu Illustrator. He's someone who, for me, I was in his DMs asking him like,
Wow.
"Oh, how do you do this? How do you do
Mm-hmm.
that? How do you get your line arts to be straight? How do you get your line art to be that?" And um, the person who then recommended me my first tablet was my cousin Tarhel. He does 3D modeling. So I came across and like, oh, you actually do this thing. I was like, yeah, this is what you use. Use a Wacom. So and then it was through him that I now got the idea to get my first Wacom tab. And first Wacom tab started illustrations as a different page, and then sometime in 2018
Mm-hmm.
I started as WoshDraws, and that's how I started.
That's inspiring. Really inspiring. Your journey, coming from graphic design, you know. I also actually did not know digital illustration was a thing until I actually saw Art Nerd's work. I didn't know digital illustration was a thing. Of course, I had read books like my book of Bible stories. I had seen those paintings on those books. Why it just never crossed my mind that this thing can be done digitally, right? It was the paper and pencil, the traditional way that I also knew uh, how to do it at the time. That's how I thought this thing to always done. Your comics are very, very, very inspiring. Like they're very catchy. They're very funny. They A lot of the episodes you release on that comic resonate with a lot of us Nigerians, in our childhood memory. Which leads me to ask, is that really what you also experienced as well, like back to back?
uh, that's an interesting question. Do experience them, and then some were things that I did experience and then exaggerated. So the things that I experienced, I did them. The things I didn't experience, but I knew were common, I also tried to find a way to integrate them and
Mhm.
also kind of exaggerate them.
I love them. I love the comics. I love how
Yeah,
you tell the stories.
thank you so much.
I love the fact that in as much as we are specifically Nigerians, right? In as much as we are in different states in the country, right? Some are in Kano, others are in the east, the south, and the likes of that. Yet we can all see one particular piece and all of us can relate. Having different background, different upbringings, but it just has a way, the storyline just has a way of unifying us together. Like, how would this guy know this? Because this was what I went through. And the other lady would say, how would Josh know this? Because this is what I went through. The story just sort of unifies it and it really just makes me feel like maybe the African parents indeed are all the same because talking about one of the illustration you did was when I think the mom sent your main character to go find her phone and he was lost inside her bag. You drew it where inside her bag was like maybe a space, something of that nature, and he couldn't find the phone. And she was like, "I would go and check now, and I would see the phone." And now she went and she sees the phone. It's something that almost every Nigerian has actually experienced. So it's beautiful to see that your comics can unify us and just say this is so true. Like there's no way this is just literally true. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. Do you currently work as an illustrator? Are you employed or you are an independent illustrator?
Yes and no. So I was independent and then I got employed and then I transitioned. So I don't work. So for illustration, I work for myself in illustration. Since have a private company that I do,
Okay.
like, I still try to keep my commissions going and just to separate like WoshDraws from me, or rather tarfism now, since it's no longer WoshDraws. So I do keep, I still do like illustration jobs and design jobs and all the likes, but I do that on a personal level. Meanwhile, my day to day, I work as a product manager with software.
Oh,
So
I see.
it's I'm always working.
Fascinating. So why did you rebrand from WoshDraws to tarfism? Why? What's the story behind it?
I think there were a couple of things combined. It wasn't just one thing. Um, so for one, I think the first that comes to my head is the draws part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of limited the perspective of what I could do. So, for example, like I said,
Mm,
I don't
yeah.
just do comics. I also do graphic design. I also do
Mm-hmm.
animation. I also do like
Yeah.
there's a stack of like creative things I do.
Mm,
So um tarfism, for example, is coined from my surname. So it's just like, for example, if someone founds a movement, like for example, Karl Marx and communism is Marxism,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, federalism, feudalism,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
just all the isms. So like
Yeah.
tarfism is like all the stuff that I do. So it's kind
Uh,
of like an umbrella kind of name. And it's also that's why like the image and the icon is more like, I think part of the inspiration as well was from Obey. I don't know if you know Shepard Ferry and Obey. The idea is like I don't know how to explain it per se, but it's more like spreading whatever I'm doing as an ideology is
yeah.
just tarfism.
Yeah. I
So it's
get.
like
I get it.
whatever I do, it's tarfism is as far
Yeah.
as it's coming from me.
From you. Yeah. Yeah. Because yeah,
Yeah.
truly, because somehow Wash Draws in a way can just send the picture that the only or the major, or not just major, but the only thing you may be doing may okay, you just draw, right? That's it. I get it. So having that whole sort of brand refresh, sort of put it out, okay, it's not just only drawings per se, right? Product management and animations and the likes of that, which is beautiful, which is quite interesting. How do you stay inspired to to do what you do? Because comics can be very draining, to be honest, right? And when you post a particular episode today, it's funny, it gets a lot of tractions, and obviously the audience are expecting that the next episode should be funnier than the previous ones, right? You should just keep going up that way. And these things include a lot of brain work, right? You come up with the story, you try to find the best way that the illustrations best explain the story. You also look out for how can you fit in the text into this comics. How would you be able the whole process of making comics can be very, very a lot. So how do you get the inspiration to do these things?
I'll take uh I'll say my major inspiration would just be the world around me. So it kind of like it ties into what you said about how um Nigerians will typically relate to it and say, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
how did this guy know that this happened?" It's just like we're all in a collective, so we talk,
Yeah.
we have bands, and then it just like it's just kind of flow. So, for example, I was doing like when the new year was crossing over, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a designer, and we are just talking of like, okay, how wild things can get, of how like just like we're just talking about things in general,
Mhm.
and wait, first, sorry, just to backtrack. We're talking about how beggars can't be choosers and how people like they need your help, and then
Oh
like they're
yeah.
still trying to choose. So I now
Uh-huh.
made an example of how, if let's say you are begging on the street and then someone gives you 500 and then you take it and you're like, "Do you have mint?" So that's, for example, is an idea of like
Yeah.
comic would start. would start. I think that's going to be my Saturday comic. It's just like, okay, you need something. I'm giving you, and then you're asking me,
Mm-hmm.
do you have mint?
Mm,
It's that, do you
I
have
get
mint,
it.
a
Yeah.
very Nigerian thing to say.
Yeah.
Someone can
Yeah.
just pull that up on you. So just like conversations like that,
Mm-hmm.
conversations at work, um you could be watching a movie and then someone would say something and then you just be ruminating on it and then you just try to like piece it together. And I mean, sometimes a comic can start with the punchline and then we just try to walk back and see how we can
Exactly.
get it to that
Hmm.
punchline. So
Yeah.
it can start either from the beginning or from the end, but it's just from the world around you and just experiencing life. So I guess that would be my biggest source of inspiration.
That's great. That's great. I'll definitely be looking forward to the Saturday comics. Definitely. I'd, I want
I'll
to
add
see.
inspired by Ubon or as
Ah,
discussed on
yeah.
Designstration.
Definitely. I really want to see the facial expression of that. The main character when the mega says if he has wings. I'm looking forward to that. It's time for a quick break. We will be right back after this break. Hey there, podcast listeners. I've got some exciting news for all the amazing women tuning in today. Do you desire to work in the UI UX industry, but you don't know how to go about it? Well, I'm here to tell you about the Design Ha Future International Women's Day Masterclass, brought to you by Pexel's School of Design. It's a fantastic opportunity for women worldwide who aspire to dive into the dynamic world of UI UX. They've partnered with seasoned designers and techies in the industry to offer a free 1-week masterclass. This isn't just any program, it's a chance to empower women from diverse backgrounds. They're bringing the training to you with 5 lucky women attending a physical class and 10 others joining virtually. And it's not just about learning, it's much more about creating a more inclusive future for women in tech. In celebration of this year's International Women's Day, I'm sponsoring 15 lucky winners into the introduction of UI UX design class, both physical and online. To apply, visit the link in the description below and also comment I have registered for the class and tell us why you should be selected. I'll catch you in the comment section. This UI UX design masterclass is free and for women only. It holds from 7th to 11th of March 2024. It's both an online and a physical class in Lagos, Nigeria. Check out pexus.com for more details on the masterclass. You're welcome back to the conversation. Do you watch anime? I love to ask this question. Do you watch anime?
Yes, I do.
You do.
I mean, I don't watch as much as I used to, but like,
Mhm.
yeah, I love anime. I used to watch a lot.
Mm.
I finished Naruto from Naruto number 1 to end of Shippuden about 3-4 times now. So that's like 700 or something episodes.
Wow.
So sometimes when I'm drawing, I just have it in the background. People don't like the fact that I listen to dub. So like the English version of people don't like that I do that, but I cannot be drawing and looking at subtitles. So
Ah,
so yeah, and frankly, I think some animes are better when they are dubbed. Like
yeah.
I think Attack on Titan is better in dub. Some people will kill me if they hear me say that, but they should
I
they should
really,
they
I
should they should rest.
even me,
Yeah.
I don't watch anime. There's no particular, no reason in
Ah,
particular. No reason in particular. I just don't watch. I don't. I've never. I I asked Sash on the podcast if watching Avatar: The Last Airbender would be considered anime, and he says no because it wasn't produced from a Japanese company.
anime.
That anything that was not any
Ah,
animation that's not produced from a Japanese company would not be considered anime. So yeah, because and the reason I asked was because I've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender and as well as Korra, right? The Legend of Korra, Avatar Korra, and has anime in any way shaping your uh illustrations in any way?
quick
Like has
one.
it
Which do you
inspired you?
prefer, Korra or Avatar?
Oh, big. Um, Ang is the best. To be honest, right? Ang is the best. Korra is trying, but there's a lot of beautiful exuberance in her lifestyle. There's a lot of childishness in there, and yes, she can be very annoying. And it's not even a comparison. Ang is top. Like Ang is the best. Korra should go and find something and sit down. anybody should bring the fight, I would fight this one. Cora should just go and sit down.
We're going to fight about this after this call. We'll fight about this after. But yes, I'm Team Cora, but we'll fight about that later.
Oh my
But,
goodness.
I guess your question was
Yeah.
for a couple of comics. I'd say yeah, like I like the way, especially how extra they can be with their reactions. So for some comics, I kind of pull some inspiration from that. So like some of the reactions that are over the top. So I think there was one we made some time ago. I keep saying we as if it's multiple people, but yeah,
Well,
there was
it's
one
the
we
brand
made.
feeling.
I mean, I have people that I always send my comics to before I draw them, so I guess that can count as we. Um, so yeah, like especially for some reactions, I think there was one comic we had about sorry for yourself, and then her eyes are red and all of that. So I would say yeah, it does play a role, not too much of a role. I would say I've steered a bit. I think at first it was heavily influenced, but I think as time progressed, I started to find my own style. Yeah, I started to find my own style and my own method. So I would say yes, but not as much anymore.
That's great. There are some cartoons that has actually, in a way, also um, influenced and helped me also. I have cartoons like Tom and Jerry, the infamous Tom and Jerry, in especially when it comes to things like exaggeration, right? I love how Tom and Jerry animators and illustrators exaggerate. Let's say I forgot who is who. Okay, Thomas is the cat. Yes, Jerry is
Yeah.
the mouse. Okay, when Jerry when Jerry sees Thomas coming for him, and he just shouts and the eyeballs go big. Those exaggerations, I love those ones as well. I love Tom and Jerry, and I also love Disney cartoons. The way their character look, that even the ladies are also drawn in a way that the female characters are drawn in a way that they are very tall, steely. I like that. And if they want to also make some kind
Yeah.
of short version of the female of any female character, they can emphasize that. I love that as well. It's sort of like it gives it a more defined shape and quite very detailed. And
Yeah.
those are things that has also influenced me moving on in illustrations.
So would you then say you're more influenced than Disney than anime?
Oh yes, Disney influences me. I don't watch anime at all. I don't watch anime. If I'm to give cartoon recommendations, wait, it's been a while I watch cartoons, to be honest. Wait, let me think. Have you seen? I've forgotten the name of the cartoon, but it's the main character in that cartoon's name was Quasimodo.
Because I've heard
He
that
had
in
this
the name.
hunchback. It was the cartoon. Yeah, the main character was this guy who has like a hunchback, and he has a face like a
Hunchback
monster
of
kind of
Notre
face.
Dame.
The storyline was good.
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
That's it. That's the name. That's the name. That's the one. With the gypsy girl. Yes, that's the one. That's
Yeah.
the one. I love that
Yeah.
cartoon.
That
It's quite
yeah, that was
old.
really good.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, I like it. Doctor Strange, the cartoon itself, like the cartoon Doctor Strange, the animation. It's old. This is old as well. Doctor Strange, the animation itself. That was another remarkable one that I really love. Um, One other cartoon that I know influenced me a lot. In fact, I don't even know why I didn't mention this one at first. It was Justice League. Justice League cartoon
Oh.
itself. I love the way that animation also was made. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's quite a
DC
number
always
of it.
kills with the
If I'm to
animation.
start watching anime, oh DC does a lot. DC, and it's quite hard to
Yeah.
choose.
The animations are
It's
always
quite
good.
hard to choose. For Marvel, I would give Marvel to I would give to comics, right? The books. I would leave that for Marvel for the books. If we're talking about the books, what comic book should I look? I would definitely say Marvel, not DC. Like go for the
Okay.
Spider-Man, like you would see the graphics, you would see details. Go for the Batman, you would see the graphics. But when it comes to the animation, I would think I would lean towards DC. Anyways, Marvel still have good animations too. These guys are exceptional. I think it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick. It's hard to pick.
Yeah.
It's really hard to pick.
It's definitely a challenge, but yeah, I really love DC's animated universe.
What was the story all about? I'm trying to remember if I've seen it.
So you know, like how Marvel has like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, starting with Iron Man, then all the Marvel movies. So DC, for their animations, they actually have like an animated universe, and compared to their movies, like it just puts their movies to shame. So I think I'll send a link to one. I think there was one that was like where Superman was. You know, Superman is typically associated with America, but there was one where Superman was like Russian or something, or he was communist, and it was very
Wow.
interesting. I'm trying to find the name. Red Sun, Superman Red Sun.
Superman Red Son.
Yeah, it was a really good one.
I'll check that out. If I'm to start watching anime, where do you think I should start from?
All right. So first, I would say what you should not start with is Naruto. Don't start with Naruto. Don't start with Bleach.
Naruto.
Those are too
Okay.
long, and anybody that recommends that to you as your first anime, they don't like you. It's a really good one, but as a first show, um, I think it will depend on the type of person you are. If you like action and you don't mind gore, I would recommend on Titan since it's almost over. It's short and it's sweet. Demon Slayer, but I would hesitate from Demon Slayer because the graphics are really good, and if Demon Slayer is what you set your bar with, other animes would disappoint. So I think I'll just say Attack on Titan as a good first anime.
That's great.
Although it also sets expectations high, but I think it's fair enough.
So basically, you're trying to say the whole anime saga, like it's like the whole thing with anime is that they don't have consistency. Like, is that it? Like, they raise the bar really high for this particular one, then the next production is like, meh.
Yeah, I would say like imagine the first movie you ever watch in your life is Endgame.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say Endgame was the first movie you ever watched, the first superhero movie, or let's say all the Endgame and all the movies that led up to Endgame, those are the first movies you ever watched. Imagine watching all those and just watching like some regular, I don't know which movie to drag, but let's say you go and watch Aquaman after that, and
Okay,
every
yeah.
other superhero movies like Aquaman, your expectations would have been sky high, and then everything after would just be meh.
I get it. I get it. If it wasn't for design and illustration, what would you be doing? If you weren't into design and illustrations,
I mean, I think I'm kind of already doing that as my 9 to 5. So I work in product management. So I would say either I would be a product manager as I am now, or I
okay.
would be a management consultant. More likely a management consultant than a product manager because, like, when I studied business in university, so when you're in that business space, the you probably be thinking of is investment banking, management consulting, this kind of jobs. But obviously, you know, in Nigeria, it's not as if, like how many investment banks are there. But most likely management consulting or something strategy related. I think that would have been um, my choice of work.
Let's talk about AI
Okay.
and as related to illustrations, specifically illustrations.
Okay.
Right. When NFT came out, right? Let me drop like a backlog story. When NFT, well, maybe not when it came out, but when it was on trend, just when NFT was on steroids, right? It was everywhere, all over the place.
Yeah, when they were
Digital,
popping.
exactly, when it was popping. Digital illustrators were being sought out for, to work on 1,000 traits and the likes of that. I got gigs even during that period. I'm glad. Yeah. I tried to put my stuff on NFT as well, but I don't know how to do it. But when NFT was on that high trend, when it was popping, to some point, maybe it's this part of the world, but then it just sort of mellowed down. Just be like when someone is being humbled by the presence of someone else, whatever, it just mellowed down. Then AI came out,
Mm.
right? AI, artificial intelligence, art. People started creating prompt. Now, with respect to AI specifically,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about artists who are AI artists? They call themselves AI artists. So basically, they generate prompts, not like they draw. And I'm not talking about artists who know how to draw. I'm talking about
Yeah.
those who don't know how to draw, who don't draw, but they basically generate prompts,
Yeah.
for art prompt. What do you have to say in that light?
All right. So for that, so I've tried some of these AI tools. I've tried DALI, I've tried Midjourney, and a couple of these. I wouldn't necessarily call them
Mm-hmm.
artists. I would say like it's something that requires skill, especially when you're trying to get AI to generate like from a prompt that you've carefully made, and it's still like to get the image you want
Mm-hmm.
from the image generator you're using. I think it does require some skill because you'd have to give if you want your desired output, you'd have to be very specific with your instructions. So, for example, when I'm trying to work on something, I give it a long list of details. I'm like, okay, I want the foreground to look like this. I want the midground to look like this. I want the background to look
Yeah.
like this. Keep this so, like, for example, now I'm coming from an artist perspective. This is what I would draw, but then I'm
Mm-hmm.
breaking down what I would draw with specific details. So, for example, even with Midjourney, um apart from giving it those details, Midjourney, you can upload an image. So with Midjourney, I'll do a sketch, add those prompts, and upload an image.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that will be different from someone who's just generating prompts alone. It does take some skill to do,
Yeah.
but if you're doing just prompts, I think you're just a prompt engineer. I mean, that is people are saying that's going to be a big field
Mm-hmm.
because it's like I said, it does take some efforts to get the outcome you want. But I wouldn't call it being an
Mm-hmm.
artist, like say actually creating. I know there's some controversy around this, but I'm I'm more interested in seeing how AI can support artists. So, for example, if you let's say you're a 2D animator, I know most people don't like drawing in betweens. I would like to see an AI that could draw in betweens for me. I think that would be
Mm-hmm.
more productive,
Yeah.
and I think we'd see like better outcomes with what people can make with AI than just using prompts and generating images.
Yeah. Very, very thoughtful. Very thoughtful because I can imagine someone wanting to hire an illustrator and, send me a portfolio and boom, you're seeing Mid Journey's works. Again, it's not like of course, artificial intelligence, these are technology. We can't fight technology. These things are here to stay. And, AI as it is today, even AI arts as it is today, it's still in its infancy state, right? This thing is still being um, about to be bettered. This thing is still being developed. So we're not trying to fight it in any way. Of course not. Just like how you said, just like what you said, how how AI can help, advance and develop, what artists would do in general. But then it's going to be quite ridiculous, to be honest, to submit a portfolio or to see a portfolio while hiring for illustrators and you see a whole bunch of AI arts that were just
Just
generated
AI
through
art.
prompts. I mean, I don't know how to feel. I remember one time I said
Yeah.
a Twitter space when I was asked when a conversation like this arises. I said, you know what? I would actually, support the motion that the illustrator should be hired just so we can fire the person that same evening. Because why do that? Why go in that direction? It can be very stressful. When you were growing up as a kid, did you have family members who supported you into illustrations, like people who encouraged you to draw, not necessarily illustrations now, but just, drawing in general?
Yeah, to draw, I would say my family was generally supportive. So like my brother could draw, my dad could draw. So like
Wow.
even from a young age, like after school, after I've done homework, then like I think I will try and find a picture of that. But I know I have a picture of like from 2001, I was drawing boju boju with my dad, so it was like these very,
Ah,
very weird looking stick figures. So like I've always had that. There's always been that support for me. Fortunately,
yeah.
I know that not everybody has that, but for me, it's like my parents were very supportive of that. My brother could draw. He has more
Mhm.
art awards than me. I don't know why he doesn't draw till now, but yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because it's not something that's quite common, to be honest, in the
Yeah.
Nigerian space specifically.
Yeah.
It's
But I
it's very
wonder why.
interesting. I think during the days of our parents, uh, specifically, it didn't look like it was that big of a deal. It didn't look like it was a fit. Maybe the field weren't looking appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would limit it to the Nigerian demographic again, right? Maybe artists, then it was either you're a lawyer, they wanted you to study law, to be a doctor, something like that. But now you say you want to be an artist. I mean, where does that happen? So I think that was probably, maybe it could be a contributing factor as to why they didn't, you know, almost
Yeah.
they didn't give that much
I imagine things were also not
attention to it.
as, I guess back then they couldn't have seen a career path as
Exactly.
how they would see it now. So like based on
Yeah.
like the internet and everything evolving. So I mean understandable, but yeah.
Yeah. At what point did you realize that illustrations could pay the bill?
Uh uh so illustrations, I would say after I got my first commission, my first USD commission. I know like it's USD now. So like when he land, I had to get it through my brother's school when he was still in school. So I had to get through his PayPal, and I was like, oh wow, this has landed. This is real. Because I mean, you get like Nigerian clients, and like yeah, you could get like some inflow, like deals could come through, and but it's just like it's Naira. Like Nigerian
Hmm.
customers have their own constraints as well. But when like a USD customer came through and it landed, I was like, oh okay,
Yeah,
okay, we've arrived.
yeah.
We've
We've
arrived.
arrived. Yeah.
But yeah, I think
It
that
was
was
that
sometime
point.
in
Mm.
I started 20 like sometime in 2019 or so. So it was around that time. I think that was also a cover art commission. And when
Mm.
that came to, I was like, okay, not only is this valuable here, it's also valuable everywhere,
Yeah.
and people would pay substantially for you to do stuff like that for them. So it was like it was really validating at the time. And then obviously like the Davido commission as well. Like that was like I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually going to touch on that, but I wasn't going to touch on that. But since you brought it up, uh, how 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 did that make you feel? Was that your wow moment in your career path?
I think so far, I mean, it was definitely a highlight. I try to not dwell too much on it, but I always use it as a. So technically, I've worked for more than one. At least now it's now Davido, DJ Spin Alpha. So it's like
Hmm.
okay, whenever I'm trying to negotiate price or someone is trying to heckle on price, I just bring
Yeah.
it out. I just put it there. I think it's actually pinned on my profile since I do ads. I just
Yeah.
no, I never say. I just say,
I,
"Oh, here
I
are my
did I did that
clients
for
that I've
Davido.
worked
I
with," and
did
then
that.
they see David. They're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, there's a so it kind of eases the conversation in terms of like people's willingness to pay and price sensitivity and all that." So I think it's very helpful if everybody has like one
Mm.
of those
Yeah.
in their
It's good.
portfolio. At least then it's just like okay, the kind of work I do is even like by people at that level, they see the value.
True.
So like it's not a question anymore.
That's true. That's true. I agree. Let's talk about hiring for illustrators.
Okay.
So what's the process like? If someone is wanting to get a job, what are the basic things as illustrator specifically? If they are trying to get a job, what are the basic things they should put in place? And I know you've been a very big part of the process of hiring illustrators before, right? What's the very basic thing? What are the key factors that illustrators should have in place? Why you know wanting to get a job as an illustrator?
Yeah. I think most importantly is understanding the role you're applying for. So, for example, if let's say the company is asking for a they're asking for like vector based. Let's say you've seen the company's website, you've seen their work, and all their work are like vector based. You should kind of get an idea of what they want. Obviously, your portfolio should be curated towards that, but not too much. Like just curate towards that so that they know that you can create what they want, and also have some other pieces that can show like your flexibility and co. But ideally, if let's say we're hiring and back then when I was still like an illustrator then for uLesson, like if we were hiring and we saw your portfolio, if we saw like a portfolio that resonated with us and like what we were already putting out, it was like a quick,
Yeah.
it was a quicker yes towards the next stage. So it's like, okay, we
Mm-hmm.
see your work, we see you've done character rigs, we've seen that you've done scenes, we've seen that you've done assets and different types of illustrations. We already have a sense. We know that okay, by the time we bring this person in, even though they might have to adapt in one or two ways, the the overall
Yeah.
structure that would support them to succeed in that
Yeah.
role is already there. So the next stage then would then
Mm-hmm.
be assessment. Um, no, I don't think many people like the idea of doing assessment because people see it as doing free work. But I think the assessment is just for you to, like, they've seen your portfolio now, they think you can do it. They're like, okay, you can do it. But the thing is, if let's say you're coming in through a recruiter, or you're coming in like you just applied blindly and like nobody knows your social media, like, ideally people would apply through their resume and
Okay.
portfolio. You still don't have that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that social proof. I wouldn't say social proof, but like we've seen that you could do it to your portfolio. But if we gave you to do it, can you do it? If you then do it in the assessment, it kind of just convinces whoever is hiring you that okay, this person can do what they said they could do in their portfolio. They can do it within the time that you gave them to do it, and they can do it in, because obviously when you're giving an assessment, you have like your requirements. You say, oh, make these things separated, make this that. Once they complete that, it kind of it it helps resolve all doubts, because hiring is an expensive process. Like if you hire
Mm.
somebody and the person doesn't turn out to be a good hire, that is a bad experience for you, the person that hired them, the company, the person that's hired, and it's a bad
Mm.
experience all around. So people would rather go into, like, by the time they're sending you an offer to sign to say okay, join our team, people would like it to be like a no-brainer. Like, okay, we are hiring this guy, and by the time they start on Monday, they will hit the ground running. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say portfolio, and if you have an assessment, just try your best with that assessment. And obviously in the interview, just like show up on time. Like if you get there, just like please show up on time.
What are some questions to expect to be asked during interview for illustrators?
So let's say during the first interview, when they've seen your portfolio before the assessment, I guess a question that would be on people's mind is, what tools do you use? So that would also help the employer understand whether like there's already a sync. So for example, if you tell me you use Photoshop and Illustrator, we're like, okay,
Okay.
we use Photoshop and Illustrator, perfect. Even if you don't use Photoshop and Illustrator, if you use, let's say, Clip Studio, then we kind of already know that we know that by the time you join, it's not going to be a different transition. So I mean, it's the same thing with like if you're hiring animators. If somebody says they use After Effects and you're hiring people that
Yeah.
use Toon Boom Harmony or Moho, it's kind of like a clash in like
True.
the time that it will get you to get up and running in that role. So they'll just want to know that. I mean, for illustrations, it's more straightforward because it's either all the tools can give the same outcome, but I guess the main difference for illustrations would be whether you are doing
Mm.
raster based, so like Photoshop, Clip Studio, or you're doing vector based like Adobe Illustrator and stuff like that. Yeah. So for some people, they would really only want vector based
I see. Yeah.
illustrators, while some they could have both, while some they could. So yeah, it's like I said, when doing your portfolio and understanding what the company is looking for, just curate towards that.
Yeah. It's great. Do you think illustrators who are actually just starting out, or they've gained some years of experience, not just starting out, but uh, do you think it's better to freelance first, or to you know go work with a startup or get hired?
It's a bit of a tricky one. I mean, so for me, I obviously started independent before I started working. Um, I would say if you can get a bit of both. So like working with a company, companies, they have their deadlines. You get to work
Yes.
with large teams. So I think working for a company is like, okay, I got to experience the full breadth of stakeholder management. So like, if you're working alone and you're working with a client, it's just you and your clients. But when you're working in a company,
Mm-hmm.
so, for example, when I was working there, I was like, okay, this is what the script writer wants. This is what the animator
Exactly.
wants. This is what the operations manager wants. This is what the creative lead wants. And it's like, okay, the script writer would write something and they'll tell you to illustrate it this way. They want it this way. And then by the time you hand it over to the animator was like, what the hell is this, man? You expect me to move?
Yeah.
Like, how do you expect me to move these 18 moving parts of this rig you've given
Yeah.
me? That kind of thing. So it's like, but it's trying to, so for illustration now, especially if you're doing for animation, you're the bridge between the scriptwriter and the animator. So by the time you receive a script and you see it,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's best for you to just meet the animator and be like, see, is this going to work? Is this going to work? And also letting the scriptwriter know that, okay, you've drawn, you've written a script with 18 children dancing under the rain. Let's be real here. I'm not drawing 18 children
Mm-hmm.
rigs for you. Just
Yeah.
like tone it down, man.
Yeah.
And then you can now say, okay, let's reach a compromise and do two. At least that way the
Mm-hmm.
production line keeps going in that
Yeah.
sense. So that's like the difference between like working for a company. Working independently, it also has its own benefits. So
Mm-hmm.
like I think back in the day I was doing like comics every week. I think it helps build that self accountability. So by the time I got into like working for a company, I was like, okay, they need this amount of scripts done in 1 week. I'm like, oh, okay, like you kind of have that idea of personal responsibility already going
Yeah.
for you, and I would say the freedom as well. The freedom as well.
Yeah. The
So
freedom.
I mean, when you're freelancing, if you don't want to work that day,
Can
you'll
just
not
sit it
work,
out.
and nothing will
Yeah.
happen to you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just like poverty will be knocking at your door if you're not careful. But like,
Yeah.
but you have that flexibility.
Yeah. When I got employed as an illustrator, my at TVP Games, where we design games for kids to learn the world through play and adults, actually, that was where I realized that the whole freelancing and being employed, they are two very different things. Of course, there's a difference between knowing something and actually experiencing something, and like experiencing it with
Yeah,
understanding. That's when I realized right,
yeah,
stakeholders have something very different. Deadlines, you have to meet deadlines, and this is, and sometimes you get some suggestions that makes you think makes you think how did this person just think about that, right? For instance, now someone can,
yeah.
just like what you said, draw 18 children dancing on that, and you be like, how can you even think that? Do you
I
know
mean, in their
and you're wanting
defense,
this in how many days? Like 2 days.
yeah, I mean, in their defense, they are trying to be creative as well. They're like, okay, if you could do 18 within that time, it would be mad, but timelines.
Timeline, right? So it's really real. How are you able to adapt to the new system of being employed, right? Coming from someone who has been an independent illustrator, who had the freedom of time, you were your own boss. Basically, you were the one, giving out deadlines. So how now being employed, how were you able to balance and adapt to the new system?
I would say for me, it was actually quite easy. So, because at that time, I think thankfully I still have my journals from back then. I used to time box my time. So my day would typically start around like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. And then from that time to like 11 o'clock, I would be doing like
Hmm.
comics for the day, like comics for that would be, I'll be trying to create comics around that time. Then from around like from 11 to 11:30, I would
Yeah.
have like a break, like get breakfast. 11:30 to 1 o'clock to 12 o'clock, I would be I would be like trying to read a book or something. Then from 12 to 5, commissions. 5 to 6, another break. Then 6 to 9, I'll still be doing some work. So I would say I was working longer hours then, because I mean, it's like I said, at the end of the day, when it's your own thing, it's your thing. So if something goes wrong, it is you that will feel it. When it was now time to like work for a company, it was quite like at that changing at that time was easy. It was like okay, they're like okay. I think also understanding the company you're working for is also important. So by the time I joined uLesson at the time, I think I had a talk with like one of the animators who was like, okay, yeah, this is a startup. Like, yes, it's creative, but like it's a startup and we need to move fast and we need. I was like, oh, okay, you guys, no problem, no problem. I mean, I was kind of already, so it was like for me, it was just like, okay, I'll just carry that same thing and move it across. And obviously, I think I actually started doing less hours
Yeah.
because, like, okay, like I had some time to rest. Now, in terms of advantages, I would say, in terms of adapting, I would say getting to work with other illustrators, which is something you will not really get when you're working independently or freelance. I think that's one of the major advantages because I would say within the first 6 months there, at that time I was working with Olamide Agumbiade, like, and I'm sure you know
Yeah.
Olamide. Yeah, I was working with Olamide. I was working with Jeffrey Oyem, a couple of really good Chukudi as well. Chukudi Wafili, they're really good guys. So by the time by the time I did like 6 months at first working with these guys, my hand was strong
Ah, ha,
because
ha,
you
ha,
know you're
ha,
drawing
ha.
something. Some
Yeah.
would just be walking by, they're like, this guy, and then some would be like, oh, what if you did this, or what if you did that, that kind of thing. So like, let's say if I'm working on a character, I'll just walk by Jeff. I'm like, oh, I'm working on this character. What do you think? Or like, how would you have done this character? And then he'll be like, oh, he'll just be drawing his own thing, and I'll be like, aha, I'm stealing that.
Yeah. Ha, ha.
So when you're working with other people, you can walk around. You can, it's like watching a speed paint. If you're
Yeah.
watching a speed paint, you get to see how people do it. But this case, working with people is like watching them do it live and being able to ask
Yeah.
them. I'll be like, okay, why have you chosen this layer filter for your this? Like, oh, I did this so that it would make this character pop this way.
Mm-hmm.
For example, working with Olamide is like, okay, why do you choose this style? That, oh, if I'm trying to get this out by this time, this saves me time in doing this. So someone like him now, he's really good with it. He's very, very, very efficient. I think I would even say he's one that's more efficient than me. He's a very efficient worker, and I think you see that in the outputs that he's able to generate.
Hmm.
So working with all these people, you get to absorb many things. I'll take from
Yeah.
Olamide. I got like he's the person that onboarded me to Procreate. It's one that finally convinced me to get. Chukwudi's work is always very, very detailed. Like he's someone that um I think I'll share his handle with you after Chukwudi work. He's someone whose work is very always very he's a very detailed oriented person. So that's attention to detail something I got from him. And I think that also carried over to my work because in comics, I was just trying to get them out as quickly as possible. But learning from someone like him as well, you'd see how like people really put attention to detail and it would leave an impression on you to do more to your own stuff.
I mean, you already started touching it. I was going to ask a question round about advantage of working in a studio, right, rather than just working from home. And you already mentioned a couple of them already, right? Which is you can get live feedback on the spot. You can draw inspiration on the spot, and I think one of the key advantage also would be access to using tools, certain tools that some may not be able to have because maybe financial limitation or whatsoever. But I think some certain studios would provide certain tools for you. Am I correct on that?
Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, so thankfully for me at the time, I already had like a display tablet, so it was just like a. But I mean, if let's say I was still using my Wacom then, and I came and I was like, okay, I was working on like a display tablet, that would be a huge jump. Um, I would say an advantage, like you said, in terms of tools, was like the computers. Like normally I'm working for my
Mm,
laptop, but now I'm working on from like a desktop specially made for illustrators and animators with like 32 gig RAM. I was like, okay, nothing is
yeah,
going to crash on this.
yeah.
And then also like
The brush will not lag.
yeah, but I think that will piss you off as well because when you're working on that and then you say you want to work from home and then you open your laptop, your laptop might have been fine for like 5 years, but once you've worked on like 32 gig RAM or something or 64 gig RAM and you go back to your laptop, all of a sudden you'll be like, why is this brush so slow? Like, why is it?
That's truly great. How do you retain your job as an illustrator? What are some practical things to put in place that can help you? What are some things that I have to do as an illustrator to help me maintain my job? Other than the basic um, thing that I agreed and signed to, what other things can I do to help retain the job I just got as an illustrator?
Mm. I like that you touched on the other things. So because like I like to think of it like a bicycle pump.
Yeah.
So you think of it as like a bicycle pump, but at the end of that bicycle pump is another bicycle pump. When you
Mm,
bring it together, like when you're pumping down from both sides, there's a lot of pressure. So think of that in between as your job. That the bare minimum at when it is pressed on both sides is for the companies like their ability to pay you. That is like your salary. Can they pay you what you want? Okay, that is that's the general expectations from them, and
mhm.
then from you, the general expectation is that you're going to deliver high quality work. And if that is all there is, there's a lot of pressure from both sides still. So if anything goes wrong, if let's say something happens to the company, or if let's say you don't deliver work as you should, it comes to an end. Like it just crashes into itself. Now, if let's say a company is not able to pay like what you'd expect, or that there are other things that a company could do apart from payment. So, for example, let's say they offer you flexibility to work remotely. Let's say they say um, they have like a good culture. Let's say you learn a lot on the job. You see, that reduces the pressure. Let's at that point,
Mm,
what your benefits are not just payment. You're getting exposure, you're
yeah.
getting flexibility, you're learning a lot, you're satisfied with the job. If it's a company that's working on something you're passionate about, you see, all of a sudden, it's not just compensation that matters to you, and then that is how the company could release the pressure on that side. So that's for what a company could do.
Mm,
On the other side, for you, it's like okay, the general expectation is high quality work.
mm,
Now that is very good. It's very good to do like high quality work.
yeah.
But there are other things you could do. So you provide alternative value. So now, if let's say a company is doing all of that and you're only doing high quality work, if something goes wrong, God forbid, let's say you're not on the high quality work side,
Mm-hmm.
you're one of the first people to
To
go.
go.
If you're doing high quality work, that could as well keep you.
Mm,
But if let's say you start providing alternative value, like you're thinking of things to improve the processes. Like I know back in this where I was very keen on, let's say, okay, let's try and adopt character rigs like across the board for all our characters.
mm,
By that way, you're providing other value that okay, you've improved the process not just for you but for the team. You've created more value.
yeah.
um, Another alternative could be, let's say, finding ways to leverage new technology. So people that are very quick to adapt new technology and bring it into the process and seeing how we can become better as a team. That would also, as you're seeing, like as I'm demonstrating now, there's less
Mm-hmm.
pressure
Yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah.
And then I guess a third would be like your general attitude. Are you easy to work with? Do people like working with you?
Mm.
Are you do you have bad character, or are you are you badly behaved? But you see, when these
Yeah.
two things, let's say if this is the company doing all these things and this is you doing all these things, there's no
Mm-hmm.
pressure. There's no pressure. But if let's say they're not doing your part, you're not doing your part, there's still that pressure. If let's say you're doing your part and they're not doing their part, it's more lopsided. You would be kept because you're clearly valuable. You're providing a lot of value,
Yeah.
but most likely you will be unfulfilled. But since we're focusing on what you could do, it's more like creating alternative value, putting out high quality work, and just are you easy to get along with, and do people don't have are you easy to work with in general? So yeah, high quality work, alternative value such as like improving processes and like finding new ways to solve problems, and attitude.
Mm. That's great. That's
I would add I will add continuously learning as well to that. But yeah.
that's great. I love the list. I love the list because of course obviously getting a job is one thing, retaining that job is another thing. And I know a lot can focus on how to get hired as an illustrator or any field actually in general. But then what comes after that? Right? How do I retain that job? How do I keep being the value and keep providing value for the company? It's time for a quick break. We will be right back after this break. Hey there, podcast listeners. I've got some exciting news for all the amazing women tuning in today. Do you desire to work in the UI UX industry, but you don't know how to go about it? Well, I'm here to tell you about the Design Ha Future International Women's Day Masterclass, brought to you by Pexels School of Design. It's a fantastic opportunity for women worldwide who aspire to dive into the dynamic world of UI UX. They've partnered with seasoned designers and techies in the industry to offer a free 1-week masterclass. This isn't just any program, it's a chance to empower women from diverse backgrounds. They're bringing the training to you with 5 lucky women attending a physical class and 10 others joining virtually. And it's not just about learning, it's much more about creating a more inclusive future for women in tech. In celebration of this year's International Women's Day, I'm sponsoring 15 lucky winners into the introduction of UI UX design class, both physical and online. To apply, visit the link in the description below and also comment "I have registered for the class" and tell us why you should be selected. I'll catch you in the comment section. This UI UX design masterclass is free and for women only. It holds from 7th to 11th of March 2024. It's both an online and a physical class in Lagos, Nigeria. Check out pexus.com for more details on the masterclass. You're welcome back to the conversation. I have one more question. Being an illustrator who basically you've been drawing you've been drawing comics and majorly for web series and the likes of that. Now, in a way, right, I would want to say maybe pivoting into illustrating for animations. How did you see the balance? Because I believe they're not the same. It's very different, right? You're doing maybe frame by frame illustrations now for animation, right? So how did you balance that? How did you make the switch?
Um, so for me, like my conception of animation at the time was, like you said, frame by frame. So like drawing everything. But I guess what really helped was, how I mentioned stakeholder management, talking to script writers and understanding, and also talking to
Yes.
animators. I think that's where communication really played a key part. I think we spent like a whole day just speaking to the animation team. Okay, what is easiest for you to animate, or what if you were to get the perfect character rig, what would that look like? They sent me a
Mm-hmm.
couple of videos. Oh, this is what we use for Duik, this is what we use for this is what we use for Moho. But just like getting all that feedback and basically getting an idea of, okay, if I was an animator, what would I want? So for example, normally when I would break my rigs, I would do the arm as one, but then they were like, oh no, we want the arms to be able to like lift up. So or like for that, for me, it was like, okay, no problem. It's breaking the arms from the shoulder to the elbow to the wrist, and the hand separately. So like that way they're able to like animate the whole character rig for the arms and stuff like that. So so that was like the first feedback. Okay, separate the limbs so that the character can move. Like, okay, no problem. Um a time now came up where they were like, the files were too heavy. So it was, instead of creating the characters in, because then I used to try and create like 16,000 pixels or something, because I mean I had 64 gig RAM, so like I was
High
going,
quality.
I was
Yeah.
hitting that thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, the
It,
rigs are too heavy, so it's
it
like,
the
okay,
the RAM must feel it.
yeah. So it's like, okay, creating these things in high definition, obviously for longevity, but when it's time to present, when it's time to give them for like when they're animating in the video, how would you compress that? So like, okay, for that I'll just make the rigs 2K, and then so that's for reducing the size one way. And then also when I draw, I usually draw like the line art separate from the color, from the shade. So also compressing all of those to one layer. So like everything limb will just be one layer instead of one folder with those components. So like, okay, flattening those, reducing the size, and just making it, communicating with them, finding a way to make their work easier. Because if their work is easier, my work is easier. That way, nobody's coming back to me with changes and stuff like that. So I would say communication was the biggest was the biggest part, and also having people who are willing to work with you, and also you being willing to work. Because I mean, if let's say you've done a rig, you've done one mad rig, you've done giving them 4K, 8K rig, and they come and tell you no, you don't
Yeah.
want this. You're like, okay, like what's your problem? But yeah, being able to work together and just trying to get things, yeah, just being able to work together and communicating and not taking anything personally because everybody's trying to make themselves better.
I got two more questions. I know I said that
All
was
right,
no. This is I got two more
all
questions.
right.
Two more questions. One, um, what are some soft skill that illustrators should have, right? When you're looking to work with companies and you're looking to get hired, what are some soft skills that illustrators should have?
I would say from my experience, I think designers do this well, especially like brand designers, being able to talk about your work and your thought process, and also not being too shy. So there's that idea that illustrators are introverts and just want to put their head down and draw. But I think it will
Yeah.
be very important for. I mean, you don't have to become a loud person or become too out there, but having that confidence, let's say if someone is calling upon you that, okay, can you explain what you did here? Having that confidence to be able to talk through your work articulately and being able to not shy away from conversations and stuff like that. So I think that would play like a huge difference. So I mean, if you look at the artists in our community that are doing really well, they know how to talk about their work really well as well. So I think that would be like that would be my major. I think that would be the major soft skill. I think.
Yeah, that's great. And one more question. Then this is actually the one more
Okay.
question. Um, how would you advise illustrators to handle feedback in workspace, especially when the feedback seems to sound as well, especially when the creative feedback seems to sound destructive?
Uh,
How do you expect? How would you encourage and advise illustrators to handle that?
I think.
Obviously, with this smile I can see on your face, it looks like there was a point in time at work when you experienced something like
Yeah,
this.
I think the first thing is not to take it personally, because especially if let's say you put a lot, you
Okay.
put a lot of effort into your work, especially if it's coming from a non-creative, for
Yeah.
example. So like, let's say you've done your work, or popped your
Hmm.
collar, you're like, this, I've just drawn the maddest thing, and
Yeah.
this one is like, oh, change the eyes. You know, your first instinct will be like, what the hell do you know
Yeah.
about eyes, my friend?
Oh, what do you know
I've been,
about
I've been
eyes?
drawing
Yeah.
eyes since you were born.
Yeah.
I mean, you may want to do that. No, let's
Yeah.
be real. Let's be real. You may want to
Yes.
do that. Like sometimes they be that pride. You be like, why are you telling me what to draw? I've been drawing. You may want to, but that. I mean, at the end of the day, that feedback is how you get better. So I think it's like, okay, be able to
Mm.
not take it personally first. That's the important thing. I think
Hmm.
that's the most important thing. Don't take
Don't take
it
it personal.
personally.
Hmm.
Don't take it personally first. Then after you've not, I'm emphasizing this because I think even the most level-headed artists, because like it's artists are very like attached to their work at times. So it's like
Yeah, true.
I'm really emphasizing on this. After you've taken like the 40 minutes to not take it personally, then
Yeah.
after taking 40 minutes to not take it personally, then you try to understand where they are coming from. So, for example, the
Mm.
person that tell you about eyes, I mean, even though let's say maybe they are not drawing or something, they have experience. They probably watch cartoons. They probably so they also have something valid to let you know. So it's like even if someone can't draw, like they have something valid. So it's to find out what they are trying to pass across. Like, okay, what's the problem with the eyes? They can now say, okay, compared to this, compared to that. And then you try to understand where they are coming from. If let's say their solution doesn't work, if let's say what they said doesn't work, you now try to mutually work towards finding a solution. So maybe it might be something that's sometimes it can be something that's actually completely in their direction. You're not
Yeah.
perfect. People would have ideas, and sometimes the ideas will be superior, and you have to accept that. So sometimes it might be 100% there. Sometimes it might be a little deviation from what you did. Sometimes it might be somewhere in the middle. But once you get feedback, I think the goal in general is to find out where that feedback lies in that loop, and then working together to like working together to like get to the next step after not taking it personally. I've
After
said this to
taking
you, don't
40
take it
minutes of not
personally.
taking it personal, you walk with them to see, then you take another 40 minutes of not taking it personal again. That's the yeah, it really can look like somebody just have something off to say about your work when you submit, to stakeholders to check.
I think I actually have a perfect examples just before we run out of time.
Yeah, sure.
I told you about rigs.
Yes.
So I remember I did like a rig so I did like a whole at the time when I was still like in the illustration, my goal was to create like a whole city
Mm-hmm.
basically. So like every rig, like if I created a child rig, that child rig would have a sibling rig. That sibling rig would have parent rig. The parent rigs, so like their parents would now have like grandparents, and then I now create another family. So the goal was that by the time I do like 6 extended families, anytime if you need a doctor, no need to draw a doctor. I have a doctor rig ready for you to go. If
Wow.
you need a nurse, I
Can
have a
you
nurse
can
rig
you
ready for you.
explain rig
So,
for those who may not know what rig is? Can you explain how just summarize rig character rigging?
all right, so a rig is like a character, a full body character that you've drawn with everything separated. So you've drawn the character. So let's say you've drawn the head. The head is
Yeah.
separate from the neck. So when an animator wants to animate it, they can just move the head and it could make
Yeah.
like the character's head move,
Mm-hmm.
separating the eyes so that the eyes could turn into the direction the animator wants it to go, and creating different mouth positions. So if they want to lip sync, just create like the major mouth positions, breaking down the torso from the arms, like I explained
Mm-hmm.
before, from the shoulders, from the
Yeah.
legs, just having everything separately.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like an idea of what a rig is. So like a child rig would have like it would be a rig with childlike proportions. An adult rig would be similar to that, like
Yeah.
obviously bigger, and then like an older person rig, like an elderly person rig, would
Mm-hmm.
also have like old person features. So maybe not as tall as an adult character,
Yeah.
and basically creating
Wow.
the full body of that character and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yeah.
I done rigs, and then I think one of the script writers, a friend of mine, was like, this your rigs that all of them are wearing the same trouser and their legs look like goalposts. When
Oh
they said this,
my
like,
goodness.
I was like, and then I caught myself. And then I did take it personally for like 2 hours.
Oh God.
I
Oh
spent
my
like 2
goodness.
hours not taking it personally. And then I explained to her, like, okay, the reason why the rig's legs are like this is
Mm-hmm.
not because of his style choice. I wouldn't want to draw, but because, like I said, animators, you talk to them like, okay, how would it be efficient for them? So if all the rigs have like similar leg build, when they are switching and animating different rigs, it's just plug and play. So they don't have to start re-rigging. Let's say if there's a rig setup, they can just carry that rig setup to another character that can. So at least it goes. So it's just explaining to them like, okay, this is why all the characters. And then they were like, oh wow, that's so smart.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's like two feelings. Like now you just complimented. Now you feel like a bad guy. But
Yeah.
also they told you, but then you feel like a bad guy that draws characters with leg like goalposts. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a balance of both worlds.
Yeah. Honestly, I've actually experienced that before. I have, right, where it looked as though, and I felt like, what does this particular person has about me? Because, and the funny thing for me was that at the time then, this person we were actually cool and we're very nice. The person was actually very nice to me. I'm trying so hard not to even specify the gender, because if I specify the gender, when the person hears this, the person would know who I'm talking about. And but then when I submit work for review and stakeholders check it out, this person sort of has something to change. This thing busts my brain. But in real time, in normal time and chat time, we're cool, we're laughing, we're happy. But it looks like during work, the person will have something to change. But then I realized it's nothing personal. It's nothing personal. It's for the development of the whole team, for development of the whole group. It truly is. And sometimes also I think some illustrators don't know that, in as much as illustration, is illustration, so to speak, it's quite more technical illustrating for animators, right? Working on a piece that an animator would later go and animate. It's not the same process. right? Unlike you're just drawing for comic and web series and the likes of that, or for book. It's very different. Very, very different.
Yeah. And just to add, like, to be honest, if you don't get that feedback and if you never implement that feedback, if you think about it, you will never grow if you don't do that.
Yeah.
So like in terms of like yours, like, because like people would normally, if you're drawing, you probably already have like, oh, this is how I draw this is how I draw that, this is the way I like to draw this is the way I like to do that. You're already stuck in your ways. So unless you are actively practicing new things, or unless you're getting feedback, you're actually not going to grow.
True, very true. And I think if and when illustrators expect these kinds of feedbacks and these kind of things ahead of time, it will help them prepare themselves to always give themselves 40 minutes to not take it personal. Thank you so much, Josh, for doing this with me. Honestly, I really appreciate this episode. Has really been amazing. It has truly been inspiring and very insightful. And there's a lot of valued information that has been shared here. And I really hope that as many who would get to listen to this, gain insightful and valuable tips that can help them in their journey. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really
thanks a lot.
appreciate
And thanks for having me on. I also had a great time as well. And wishing you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode on the Designstration podcast with Ufot Ubon. If you enjoyed this episode, kindly leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. You can also suggest a topic or ask a question by filling out the form in the description below. We also appreciate when you share this podcast with friends and other creatives, even as you make plans to join us again next time, as we bring you more insightful conversations like this. Design plus illustration equals Designstration.